Hello, Andrew.
Hello, doctor.
We're out of the closet.
We are out of the closet, and in a couple different locations for the first time. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes.
You sound awful, but that's okay.
Oh, great. Sorry about that.
It's all good. It's all good. Today's a special day. I'm very excited. We have our very first guest on the show. That's what I'm bringing for our question. So I'll just maybe introduce them, unless you have anything you want to say first.
No, I'm good. Let's get into it.
Okay. So today we have Dr. Weisinger. He's trained in clinical counseling, organizational psychology. He's the author of several successful books, including the New York Times bestsellers, Nobody's Perfect and Performing Under Pressure, The Science of Doing Your Best When It Matters Most. He's appeared in over 500 television, radio shows, including The Today Show, Good Morning America, Oprah, ESPN, and NPR. And we're so lucky to have him join us today. I noticed there's a few things in your bio too. You're a pioneer in the emerging science of pressure management. So maybe we'll talk about that too, but welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is awesome.
Where are you from?
I am in the East Coast, in the lovely state of Connecticut, in the town of Norwalk, Connecticut.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
We're expanding, Andy.
Weather's just starting to get nice.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we're hit and miss. We don't have snow this week. I think this is our first week without snow, which is
this weekend though. They're forecasting it
close to summer, but it's all good. Maybe we'll a couple more weeks of snow, maybe. So yeah, we were going to talk today about parental pressure and whatever else you think is going to be helpful for us to know on the topic of parenting. I don't know, was there anything related there with this emerging science of pressure management?
Well,
is that related to parenting?
I'll tell you what is most interesting is I got an email last night with an article in which my book was mentioned, and it was because they are promoting on PBS a new movie, documentary style, about a high school in San Francisco, Lowell High School. It's called Trying Harder. And it is about basically focuses on the intense pressure that these kids are, experiencing. In the trailer, where do you want to go to school? It's Harvard, Yale, Stanford. It's like winning a lottery ticket. Mm-hmm. So that, again, is just another example of the prevalence of what young people are experiencing, and it is only going to get worse. I don't want this to sound like hyperbole, but it's because it isn't. But unhealthy parental pressure is the global pandemic. Mm-hmm. That is the global pandemic. So I was doing a webinar with a school in Toronto the other day, very competitive, private school. And the first thing the guy wants to tell me, the headmaster, is, well, I'm not going to say 100% get into the best schools, but 100% of the kids get into the schools really that they, really want to go to, all good schools. And I told him, I said, that's the problem, what you just said. I'd be more impressed if you told me 100% of the kids graduated with no mental health issues. Mm-hmm. Yale did a study. 88% of their law students, 88% by the time they're out, have experienced extreme mental health issues, depression, among them. Right. And it's worse in China. It is the global pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Actually, we just had an episode on what's parents' role in education that just came out. And we are very much like that. I think I talk a lot about this shared delusion where you have to get the best grades to get into the best university, to get the best job, to be happy in life. And that's just not the way it is. And it's really sad to see. I was hoping after COVID, we would have a huge shift in our education system, focusing more on the social, emotional needs of our children versus the curriculum. And that's really what this focus should have been as our kids came back into school, focusing on that piece. But yeah.
Well, actually, because I've done work in that area, and what I found is that parents of young kids, like if they're like 4 years old, 5 years old, were more focused on the emotional development and the adjustment. Whereas parents of older kids, say ninth grade and up, we're not concerned about that at all. Their only concern was, are they going to be behind now, and what's going to happen with their SATs, and
Right.
So what do you feel makes that shift in the parental kind of mindset? If where does that come from, or even before that, where does this global kind of perception of that need come from, in your opinion?
Well, here's what I think. Let me backtrack a little and say that I had written this book called Performing Under Pressure. And then, like most authors, when you have a successful book, you're looking to do what they call the cash in, the next book and so on, get the big bucks up front and so on, because the last one was successful. So I thought I'd do a book for parents on helping your kids handle pressure, like the Little League game, the SATs, the student performance. And then that Varsity Blues scandal came out.
Yeah.
And as I started looking at that and thinking about that, I started to realize I am barking up the wrong tree. The kids are not the problem. It is the parents. And I don't care what parents like try to deny this and so on. When I talk about unhealthy parental pressure, the parents are the source of that. And there are certain attributes which I can share with you that would define what I call a pressure parent. And I want people to know those attributes are universal. It's just more intense in places like Japan and China because of their educational systems, where the child is inevitably thought to be responsible for taking care of the parent. So there's that much more pressure on the kid to have to get a good job. Mm-hmm. So I think that a lot of the pressure that is created, quite frankly, comes from dysfunctional parents that I have met many of, that live vicariously through their kids.
Yeah.
Now, I knew a person, and I'll be really specific, my sister, whose daughter went to Yale. When you would speak to my sister, within 1 minute, you would know that her daughter was at Yale. She was living like vicariously,
right.
And it's like, oh, my son got into Princeton. And what is it? Oh, congratulations. My thought was, why am I congratulating the parents? They're not going.
Right.
Yeah.
My comment is, send my congratulations to your kid. Sports parents. How many fathers are frustrated athletes and they put their kids into sports of which the kid has no interest in? And I'll refine all these points. How many mothers force their kids? I used to see this because at the time when I lived in California, and my wife at the time, she was working, a day job as a nurse. So I would be the one who would go to all like the quote mommy and me classes.
Right.
Like I had mothers convinced it is not an A birthday party if I am not there. I was like the only father. It was a wonderful experience. But what I also observed is many mothers, their kids didn't want to be in these classes. It was for the mother to say, oh, I can see my friend. It's really a date for the mom with her friends. And they'll say things like to the kid, if you don't get dressed right now, you're not going to go to your dance class. When in reality, it's the mother who wants to go to the dance class in the first place.
Right.
So parents, many times I found, try to get their own needs met through the experiences of their kids. And that can be a very dangerous path for parents to go down, because inevitably what will happen is the parent will put a kid in a situation that the child does not want to be in. My co-author is the head psychologist at Phillips Exeter Academy. And I always say to him, I said, now you're telling me that when you have a fourth generation Exeter student, that you don't find it strange that all four kids wanted to go to the same school?
Right.
You're saying third generation of Harvard, you mean nobody wanted to go have a good time at UCLA or at Michigan?
Yeah.
And that's, quote, what happened. So a lot of it is the parents. And through that, I found that there were certain attributes that I like to call pressure parents that they live by, and it drives their kids into a wide array of mental health disorders, anxiety disorders, substance abuse, eating disorders, suicide. Did you see the movie Dead Poets Society?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to be an actor. No, you're going to be a doctor. No more acting. What does the kid do? Commits suicide, shoots himself. Yeah. Now, the sad thing is, film, art does imitate life. Mm-hmm. I've known people where that has happened.
Well, actually, when I was 25, I was going to LA to be an actress. And my mom's like, what are you doing with your life? Fortunately, it's turned out I've found something else that I love, but not everybody else has that opportunity. I have so many questions, I guess. Well, let's go to those attributes. What are some of those universal attributes that you find?
The first is that pressure parents tend to see the world in terms of scarcity of opportunities.
Yes.
In terms of there's only 8 Ivy League schools. Right. There's only a certain amount of admissions. So everything is scarcity. There is not enough for everybody, whereas other people will see the world has an abundance of opportunities. Now, because there are so few opportunities, pressure parents become very competitive. See, with the pressure parent, it's not good enough to keep up with the Joneses. You must beat the Joneses. Right. There's only 2 kids can get into Harvard from your school, and you got 10 friends competing. You got to do better than them, and so on. Right. And because it's so competitive and so scarcity of opportunities, whenever you have one, it's the most important thing in the world. You know, one of the interesting things about pressure that well-intentioned, and let me say these are all well-intentioned parents. Parents want what is best, but inadvertently they're sabotaging them. And one of the ways they do that is by making everything important. So if you're back in grad school and I say to you, you better study, this is the most important test of your life, I've just may increase the probability that you will not do well because I increase the importance. The more important you make something, the more pressure you experience. Yeah. It's counterintuitive. But the best thing a parent can really say is the SAT, it's just another test.
Yeah.
This is why elite athletes will always say, how do you prepare for the Super Bowl and whatever? It's just another game. That's what the press hates, because in their mind, it's the most important thing in the world. But why would you do anything different than you've been doing before?
And that's one thing I'm always talking to parents about is, well, first of all, with anxiety, for example, the more we talk about it and ask questions, leading questions, the bigger we're making that anxiety, or about, if somebody's worried about a test, then the more questions, how did you study and how much did you study? And but like we're just creating, but even just with general parenting, it's no skin off my back, kid. If you don't want to wear your winter coat, cool. It's your choice. What you want to do.
And that is really a great thing to say. Because what it does is that it gets rid of a power struggle in terms of you have to wear a coat or something, you have to study or whatever. And it puts it under the child or teens, their own volition. And anytime you can put something under a person's own volition, you will actually decrease the amount of resistance, because now they're doing it by choice rather than by demand. My son, very similarly, I think he might have been like in 8th grade, 9th grade. He said to me, well, Dad, if I do good on the test, will you get me something good? And I said, no, I get you something good because I love you. Mm-hmm. It has nothing. I said, your grades is your responsibility. See, this is a problem of a pressure parent, because another attribute is they're very controlling.
Right.
They're so controlling because they do not have the fundamental parental expectation that is the only healthy expectation and realistic expectation for a parent to have. I expect you to do your best. Mm-hmm. What many parents cannot handle is that the kid's best might be a C.
Yeah.
See, that's when they start blaming the school and the teachers. I remember once a coach called me because they were having trouble dealing with a parent who the daughter was in track. Nice high school in New Jersey. And the father said, she has to run faster, and I want you to increase the workout so she can be a, Division I, star. There was no chance that was ever going to happen, ever,
right.
Ever. And I told the coach, I said, tell the father that you will increase the workout she has to do, but the only way it'll work is if he does the workouts with her. he's going to have to run 5 miles a day with her and really sweat and, and so on. And he did not want to hear, your daughter's just not that good. I could see a kid on a high school basketball team, but he's not playing at UCLA.
Yeah.
And that's what parents don't want to hear. One of the worst things a parent can do to a kid is put them in a situation that they really don't enjoy. Mm. What is the point of that? Yeah. So I'm saying an urgency is another big attribute. So the kid comes home from high school, Christmas vacation, first day. And what do the pressure parents say? Did you do your homework yet? Get it out of the way. Do it now. And so on. Or start on your college application. Everything has to be done now. So they got perfectionism. Everything has to be perfect. Kids of pressure parents will hear many times, this is really good, but it's never, quote, a standalone. Yeah. Because they're always thinking, and that's why these kids feel no matter what I do isn't good enough.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get competitiveness, you get a sense of urgency, scarcity of opportunities, competitiveness. This is what is called clinically hothousing. Mm. And where the kid goes crazy. I found a diary that a Chinese student wrote in an article that I had written from 2 psychologists. One was from McGill and the other from University of Michigan. And it was on academic pressure in China. And they had diaries. And I felt like crying when I read this. One kid wrote that he used to love, the best part of his day was walking to and from school under the sunlight. He said now it's like walking under a dark cloud because all he's thinking about is how much homework he's going to have to do for his parents. His parents would say, you got a lousy 90 on a test with all the things we give you. This is how you support us and give back to us.
Wow.
I mean, it's unreal.
Yeah.
So this is what I want. So, and again, the great paradox is these are well-intentioned parents. We want our kids to do well, for them. And another thing is that pressure parents have is very specific criteria. I grew up in a very affluent community in Great Neck, Long Island. And many kids would get the message, oh, yeah, of course we're going to pay for your college or whatever. But the meta message is, but we have to approve of the school. I remember one of my friends, because this was 1966, and she got into Berkeley, where she really wanted to go. And in the 60s, it was a pretty radical time. The parents would say, no way you're going. If you go, we're not paying. This is no different than the father saying to his daughter, of course, I'm going to give you a great wedding, as long as I approve of the guy.
Yeah.
The parents who say, we'll support you, whatever you want to be, we'll support you, until the kid says he wants to be a forest ranger.
Right. So, I'm always talking about, I don't want to give parents more to beat themselves up again about guilt and shame and all of those kinds of things. And I do think, we take our gut and do the things that we think are going to help support our children be as successful as they can be. Do you think a lot of this comes from fear? I mean, scarcity certainly does, but is that what drives this?
Competition is a natural pressure inducer.
Yeah.
This is why that when psychologists do studies and they're studying, performing under pressure, one of the variables they will manipulate is competition, when you're competing with somebody else, because, and this is what gets people aroused in the sports world. They call it competitive arousal. I mean, when two athletes are playing and one punches the other, is that athlete really thinking that's going to help his team? When they tackle somebody and they're not even involved in the play, that's 15 yards, illegal roughness and so on, or unwarranted violence, does that really, quote, help? These people aren't managing their emotions, and a lot of that comes from competitiveness. Mm-hmm. I mean, kids are so, Stuyvesant School, which is one of the most competitive schools where intellectually gifted kids go in the States. It's in New York. Well, they had the biggest cheating scandal in high school history.
Oh, wow.
And my question was always, if the kids are so smart, why do they have to cheat?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just that pressure. Well, and I think there's this constant comparison that happens that's worsened with social media. And I always said, I'm not going to be that mom. I'm going to enjoy my kids and they're going to enjoy their childhood. We're not going to sign them up for a million classes. And then I had my baby. And guess what? With other parents, aren't you watching baby Einstein and doing all these classes and doing this? And there was that pressure, like, maybe I do need to be doing these things right from the time they're born, listening to classical music.
That's right.
And there was a point where I got sucked in and for about a month or two. And then I took a step back saying, what the heck am I doing? No, I do know better. But it's so easy. Even I got sucked into this, right? Like we have to get in advance. I mean, my daughter started reading by the time she was 3, she could read, and it's like, at what cost? At what cost?
Now she's reading naturally at 3. That's great. But I found many studies that will show that parents who focus like on early reading, the end result is they turn their kids off to reading.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. It's like, the 4-year-old that has to play a sport and so on. And then eventually they don't want to play.
Right.
I had one mother where she was insisting because her father played the violin and she had his violin, that the son must play the violin. He had no interest in that. I told him, I said, tell your mother next time, if she loves it so much, for her to take violin lessons, and then you can tell her where to put the bow. Simple as that.
Yeah. And we know, I think there's that belief too, that they have to be early starters to be able, you have to start the violin at 4 but we know now that's not true. It's the kids who get to explore and try lots of different things that they're interested in. Eventually, if they want to learn the violin, you can learn the violin at any age. You don't have to be a little 4-year-old prodigy.
Let me tell you, self-disclose something, is that, so when I was in high school, I went to a very competitive high school in Great Neck, Long Island. It was always in that time, in the 60s, ranked by the New York Times as one of the best top 20 public schools in the country. Now, there were 440 kids in my high school class. I graduated 14th from the bottom. The first school I went to, my mother cried. It was only accredited in the state of New Hampshire. The bottom line is I had the greatest 2 years of my life. It was like the movie Animal House. It was wild. Card games every night. And, it was phenomenal. I had a better 2-year college experience at that school than any of my friends who were at Ivy League and prestigious schools. Now, years later, when I went back to my 50th high school reunion, I couldn't wait. The bottom line was I was the only one who wrote 14 books. I was the only one who was on all the TV shows. I was the only one who carpooled with Meryl Streep. And all my friends, Harvard Law, I went to Harvard Law and so on, these were some of the most boring people that I have ever met in my life. So when you say an early starter, what my mother taught me is it doesn't matter where you start. It matters where you end up. Mm-hmm. And one of the great things about the American educational system is that, unlike China, for example, it allows for late bloomers. You can be a terrible student in 11th grade, but still be in a great school. You cannot be in 11th grade in China because they have different tiers of their schools. So if you don't test well enough to get into the good ones, you're stuck in lower tier of schools. In England is basically the same way. So that is a good thing in terms of, and I would tell parents that, yeah, okay, so your kid's fooling around when they're, and young and so on, whatever, but that does not handicap them for life.
Right. So all of this to say, all of this pressure, sorry, Andrew, did you have questions?
No, keep going.
Okay.
I'll jump in when I get a chance.
Okay. But so all this to say, I mean, I think there's a societal fail and now the parental piece where we're trying to do our best. We're well-intentioned. We want our children to be as successful as possible, but, inadvertently we're putting all this pressure on our kids and breaking them, emotionally. We're putting on so much pressure and we're seeing anxiety, depression, suicidality in it way more than any other generation. So what do we do? What do we do?
That is a good question. First, I want people to know that pressure is inherent in every parent-child relationship, because you remember that pressure first was a physical entity. In a physical perspective, pressure it's a force. And that psychologically is what parental pressure is. It is a force that has evolutionary utility. You're trying to use this force to push your kid down the path that will likely ensure that he or she will be successful. So you can't get away from the concept that parental pressure is inherent. That's why there's studies all over the world and unharmful pressure all over the world. What I have found is what parents can do is to utilize this force in a positive way. I found that there are 4 key skills, if you want to call them, skills. They've been around since the beginning of time. And it starts with what I like to call positive parental expectations. Parental expectations is the big bang of parental pressure. So how many children do you have, may I ask?
We have 2.
Okay. So when you came home with your first one, the baby, and you're from the hospital, there is no pressure on the kid. It's actually quite the opposite. There's pressure on the parent. The kid is deciding when he will sleep, when he or she will eat, when they will go to the bathroom. You are at the mercy of that. And then things start to change, where now the parent starts to formulate some expectations. I expect you to sleep 10 hours a day. I expect you to eat on these hours when I wake you up and go to the bathroom and so on. And this is the beginning of that force where the parent now, whether they realize it or not, are trying to direct their child into conforming to certain sets of behaviors. Now, one of the things for people listening, I would say to parents, start to think, what are the expectations of you have for your kid in different spheres? Mm-hmm. In social sphere, what are the expectations? Some parents, I've seen mothers that their expectation for their daughter when she's a freshman in college is to join the same sorority that the mother is. Another parent might say, I don't care about that. I care that she's in inorganic chemistry. They have their academic expectations. We have that, but some aren't necessarily important. Like academic expectations, social expectations, sports expectations. When I think of my son, the only expectation I had in sports is enjoy the sport. I never had an expectation of him that he was going to be a star athlete, but I had other friends who expected that of their kids.
Yeah.
So become aware of the expectations that you have, and also ask yourself, how many of those expectations come from your own parents? Just because your parents expected you to do really well and so on, doesn't mean that is the same expectation you should have for your kid. This is why I said that the core expectation is, I expect you to do your best. I remember my father saying to me, no matter what you do, I believe you will be successful. Trusting your kid to succeed. So what I would tell people listening is to write down your expectations independently of your partner in those different areas, and then compare them.
Yeah.
How do you expect your kid to go to school? The father might say, well, I expect them to be, get like A's. And the mothers say, are you crazy? I was just at a family gathering where I saw that happen, where the father had to say to his wife, you think he's going to, I said, he's a computer nerd. He's not going to have, he doesn't have any social skill. And the kid is sitting right there. When he's saying that, he was a student at the University of Michigan. And the father's saying he's not going to be social and out there and get that through your head. So it's very important that the parents have a consensus on what to expect from their kid. Otherwise, the child will get double messages, and where that is.
And I usually have, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think we've been lucky because we didn't start out with the alignment of expectations conversation. We just naturally fell into having the same expectations, which I'm looking at it now as we're really lucky, because for us, It always comes down to the effort. We want to recognize the effort they put into it, not the result. Like if I know that they're trying hard enough, that's all I need, right?
Andrew, that is so important.
And it is, because to me, and this was something that Caroline taught me very early, is don't focus on we had talks about everything, like saying that your kid is beautiful is not the way to start. Like, talk about other things that build that character, build that, your favorite word, that resilience in certain situations. And we were very lucky, and we've applied that across a lot of different realms. And we have those friends as well that play similar sports to our daughters, and the conversations are dramatically different and the expectations are dramatically different. And I'm happy if they don't forget their gear. I'm happy if they remembered their water bottle and they went out and had a good time. Like, that's kind of where we set that bar, right? Let them enjoy it for what they want it to be.
And I think everybody says, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, everybody says, yeah, we just want our kids to do the best, but our big butts get in the way, because as long as their best is here, right? So it's really about do your best, whatever that looks like, whatever your best looks like. And it's going to be different for you as it is going to be your sister. Right. And I think that that's really important. And so it's not looking at, in the words, I think, Andy, we wouldn't say you're so smart. It's like, look at how hard you worked to get to where you are. Right.
And because that's what leads to, as we know, a growth type of mindset. But on that point that Andrew made, that is another difference between what we would call supportive parents and pressure parents. Mm-hmm. Pressure parents are only concerned about the outcome. So they don't care about the effort. The truth is, the pressure parent doesn't want to know if you cheated or whatever. They're just looking at that outcome. Yeah. And what supportive parents do, just like supportive partners, just like supportive managers, less so in the business world because results there are important. Mm-hmm. But focusing on the effort is really important rather than focusing on the outcome. And one of the ways that you can help your child perform, especially your teen perform better under pressure, is to get them not to focus on the outcome, whether they win or lose, just to get back to focusing on doing your best. Yeah. Serena Williams would say that when she would play, her goal was never to win. Her goal was always to do her best. And if she does her best, most likely she's going to win. And one of the things I want people to know, both for themselves as adults and for their kids, nobody rises to the occasion under pressure. That is totally a myth. Most people do worse under pressure. You are in the minority if you do the same. You're in the majority if you do worse. And if you think you do better, then you are clearly delusional. Mm-hmm. Tom Brady does not do better under pressure. He just does the same. He's always the best. So the only way a good team can lose or be upset is if the good team plays below their capability. The C students never getting 1,600 on their SATs unless they cheat. So getting people to focus on and for parents to comment on the process and the effort rather than the outcome is a very important takeaway for parents to remember.
So how and this may be a really difficult question to answer, but for those parents that now recognize that perhaps they have some of these parental traits, right, that they are potentially walking the path that they maybe don't want to, how do they consciously start changing that? And I say that as they don't know that they're doing it, right? So it's obviously something inherent to them that they brought forward through their own history and their own journey. How do you either help them, or how do they recognize themselves to make that conscious change to start being more of a process versus outcome type parent?
Well, it starts, as I said a minute ago, with formulating realistic expectations. And if I'm talking to 100 parents and I say, okay, how many of you expect your kids to get into an Ivy League school, and everybody raises their hand, somebody's being unrealistic. Like 97% of them are being unrealistic. So how can you start to get on the pathway of assessing whether your expectations are realistic? One is to use past behavior to predict the future. If your kid is all the way up to ninth grade and just getting a C student, unless they are an extreme underachiever, it would really be unrealistic to think all of a sudden when they're in ninth grade, they're going to start turning out A's and B's. If your son or daughter was at best a third rate or at the bottom of the tier of the tennis team, it would be kind of foolish to tell them that they can be the best player and that's what you expect. Past behavior is a good predictor. Quantifying the expectation. So when one of those parents raises their hand and says, yeah, I expect my kid to get an Ivy League school, fine, put your money where your mouth is. How much are you willing to bet on that? I'd come home from a chemistry test. My father would say, Hank, how'd you do on the chem test? Oh, I did great. Oh, you get an A? I don't know, but I did great. And then he'd say, what are the chances you got an A? 90% no, 80% no, 70% no. Bottom line is I ended up with a 2% chance I passed the test. So when the parent quantifies, it makes them really look at things realistically.
Yeah.
The second skill that I found to be really important, and you've heard this a zillion times, is for the parent to learn how to respond differently to their kid with a sense of empathy. Mm-hmm. That is very important. And I'll give you some things, but I just want to say, because one of the great things about psychology is you're always learning. And I've learned a lot about empathy and new ways of conceptualizing it. And now when I am seeing, which I never really thought of before, that there's two parts to empathy. See, that comes from an animal instinct in terms of to be protective. So as soon as you see the child is in trouble or struggling, the empathic parent, wants to rush in. But see, that's the animal instinct. And if you do that all the time, your kid will never learn how to deal with certain things. So when I see my kids who are still on my payroll, struggling with a financial issue, all of a sudden I feel sorry for them. All right, I'm gonna give them $200 or $300. And I'm saying, wait a second. What is wrong with them having a little financial anxiety and managing it on their self? Mm-hmm. So the second part of empathy that the parent needs to learn how to do is to step back so they can reflect on what their kid is experiencing. Now, a good way of doing that and a very fast way of generating an empathic response. My son came home from a science test once, and he had ADD in high school. And I never really wanted to acknowledge that. I wanted to just say he was a slacker, and so on. I feel terrible about that because once he got on some meds, he won an award for turning himself, around. But anyway, I said, Danny, how'd you do on the science test? Oh, it's terrible. I saw a lot of questions that I didn't even know or understand. And I was about to say, old Hank, I told you should have studied more. I said, you can't cram. You need to give 5 days in advance to study. Grabbed myself. Hank, does that help? So see, that was my own frustration and anger. And I stepped back and then I said to him, that must have really been scary. And he said, that's exactly how I felt. Yeah, because that's how I felt when I looked at a ninth grade chemistry test and I was a D student. That's what I thought of. So I would recommend to parents, the next time your son or daughter tells you an experience, before you respond, I did poorly on a test, I didn't make the team, one of my friends lied to me, step back. This is an example of using your emotional intelligence and conjecture up that experience that you had. It doesn't have to be the same. And you'll find yourself responding more effectively. So that's one way of how you can generate an empathic response. And also I find another good way is by when your kid is talking, rather than responding, simply get them to tell me more. And then sometimes throw in, there's a formula, like there is stuff in this wonderful book called The Unlikely Art of Parental Pressure. There are other ways, but this sense of empathy and experiencing in a non-evaluative way of what your kid is experiencing is crucial.
Yeah.
And then the third was what I like to call growth communication. I'll say that quickly, where it's using key communication skills, praise, criticism, and questions to help your son or daughter articulate and learn rather than put them down. Your work is sloppy is not a very effective way for a parent to criticize on that. Whereas I think you can write a lot neater, makes it a lot more positive. Using questions, what did you do at school today? That's like an interrogation. This is why teens don't like to talk to their parents, because they feel that they are being interrogated.
Yeah.
But you can also use questions. I'm really curious what you think. And I'm really curious in terms of how you feel about this, to invite them to articulate their inner world. And once they articulate their inner world, it becomes easier for the parent to understand it and to respond with a sense of empathy. And the last one is boundary management, which is hard for parents. Here's the general rule. If it's the right amount of involvement in your kid's life, your kids will call you supportive. If it is too much, they will call you intrusive. And Andrew, you give a good example, with the sports, that you just want your kid to have a good time. What do kids who play sports want from their parents? Here's what they want. Buy me the best equipment and drive me and pick me up. You can come to a game, keep your mouth shut, and don't tell me how to play my sport. In my hometown of Westport, Connecticut, you hear parents say that the fathers ruin Little League because every father thinks they're an expert. So those four things, and managing that. I mean, when many parents don't even knock on their kid's door when they walk in the room. So let's say that your kid is in the shower, teenager, and you're in their room and so on, and their cell phone rings. Do you look at that and see who they're calling and what the text message be? Or do you totally ignore it? I've had parents who feel, I'm paying their cell phone bill, I have a right to see who they're talking to and who their texts are. When your kid says, I don't want to do this, at what age do you listen to them? Or do you keep saying, no, you have to keep trying, and so on? Part of being a successful person is knowing what you don't like, as well as knowing what you do like.
Yeah. And I think, we talk a lot about boundaries and we don't have tons of expectations, but there's certain things. I do have what I call red lines. I will step in sibling rivalry if there's broken bones to be had, if there's some life-threatening thing, yet you must hold my hand while we cross the street. That's usually when I would put my foot down. Otherwise, social media, I'm pretty strict around. Otherwise, we don't have lots. But even the communication, I'm all about empathy. But I got to say, I did have 3 things, but they knew early on what the expectations were. You must learn how to swim, to skate, and ski. Being in Canada, those are 3 really important things that you must learn. And we've got lake property. So you need to learn to swim. So there were things, but my children knew that going in. They've always known that that's an expectation. But I don't care if you want to take piano, if you want to do this, if you want to do that, I don't care. But for our lifestyle and those things, I feel like, as a family. I just want to distinguish
for the folks listening, saying that you must learn how to swim is very different than saying you have to go to the Olympics.
Totally.
I mean, basically, you're saying it's to have fun. We can't have fun in the water if you can't do this. So that is very, very different
Absolutely.
than the expectation of you have to be a great swimmer because I was on my swim team. In college.
Very much so. Very much so. This has been great.
Fantastic.
Anything left unsaid, Andrew, that you feel like loose ends?
Well, every time I had a question, and that conversation naturally went there, and I think we covered. This has just been phenomenal to hear, and I love how you broke down those parental traits and the pressures, and it's a great reminder for me on certain things that maybe we've done okay, but we can look at differently, and I like the fact that it's expectation and communication at the core, right? In terms of what is it that we're trying to do, and then how do we talk about it as we go through it in a way that is not critical, not stressful, and I love the scarcity component, right? Like not from a place of scarcity, and instead and I, one of the things that you said was when we're talking about the kids and how they learn, it dawned on me that by not focusing so much on what the outcome for our girls has been, they've naturally become ongoing learners. Like they will go, like when we were first had kids, I wanted my kids to be big music fans because I'm a big music fan. And it wasn't until I stopped making them listen to my music, it wasn't until later that I realized, no, they actually really like it and they do listen to it, but it's because I walked away from it and just kind of left it on the table for them to pick up on their own. And it's such a great, demonstration of exactly that. Here's what I think you need to learn. You pick it up as you go, right? It's up to you on how you want to incorporate that into your life and just being okay with it. And now both of them are very big music fans, right? And they love diving into conversations about it, which is great for me. But had I continued on the path I was, and it's a very small thing, but had I continued on the path, they'd hate it.
And I'm sure they turned you on to certain types of music that you never would have been exposed to.
I don't know if
I never listened to Eminem before my son was playing him.
Oh yeah, you got to listen.
And now I realize that in that movie, 8 Mile, Eminem did the greatest song about choking.
Yes, exactly.
Pressure that I ever heard in my life.
Absolutely.
And I have my son to thank for being, turned on to that.
It is those things. It's those shared experiences now that we can do. There's an online app, a game, that every day they give you a second of a song and you have to see if you can guess that. And my daughter and I rush to see who can figure it out first. And it's a fun little connection we now have.
Go to YouTube TV and look up the old show that I used to watch growing up called Name That Tune.
Oh yeah.
Love it. Oh, yeah.
Right? Where they run down and they have to. So there you go. You're
absolutely. It's great
into fun. Your relationship. That's great.
Yeah. Well, and even lifelong learning. I mean, our littlest had COVID the past 2 weeks. She's been in lockdown or in isolation, and she's been researching. She wants to go. It's not sitting and watching TV all day. She actually wants to go learn new things that she wants to bring back to her class. Like, look at what I learned this week while I was away. So that's the kind of thing we want.
And one more point I want to make is that in the area of parental pressure, everything is defined from the kid's point of view. Like parental warmth, that there were big differentials, and parental warmth was one. For pressure parents are more conditional acceptance. I mean, their kid it's like a sports contract. You perform, you get goodies. You don't perform, you get nothing. So the parental warmth in terms of doesn't mean that you accept everything your kid does, but it means that you don't reject them because of things. You can disapprove. Exactly. Just like I'm not suggesting that you have to lower your standards. You can still have high standards that you think are important, but forcing and yelling are not good ways to communicate what you expect. And, when you mentioned also what else parents can do, and this is going to be hard for a lot of parents have to get their own life. It's just like, some people, my kids are going away from college, empty nest, and they're depressed. Whereas I know other people, when they say, this is going to be phenomenal. They're out of their house. I can do whatever I want, and so on.
Yeah.
So many parents have to get their own life. And because they don't, they put so much emphasis on their kids.
Yeah.
And the other one thing I want people to remember is, again, get to that point that pressure is a force. And when you can use some of the things that we have been talking about, focusing on the process, the effort, rather than the outcome, having a sense of relaxation rather than a sense of urgency, opportunities rather than scarcity.
Yeah.
When you can think like that and execute those principles, then that becomes a guaranteed way that I can say to all parents that the force will be with you.
Oh, that was a perfect way to summarize it.
I love it.
On point. Yeah. I only wish we did this on May 4th.
I know. One more day. Well, thank you so much. It was absolutely wonderful having you. I'm sure our listeners are going to be grateful that they didn't have to listen to Andrew and I for the whole time. So
thank you for having me.
It
This
was
was such
wonderful.
a pleasure. I am
Two of you.
hugely grateful for your time and your knowledge, and thank you so much for sharing it with both of us. This is fantastic.
Thank you.
All right.